Hello and a very good afternoon for all of you dialing in from Singapore and across Asia, and welcome to those calling in from other parts of the world as well. My name is David Kelly and I'm the Executive Director here at the British Chamber of Commerce in Singapore. And we're thrilled to host today's session, a fireside chat with the Right Honourable Penny Mordaunt MP and Paymaster General. We are honoured to be joined today by Penny, who has a wealth of experience, and in today's conversation with the Chamber's President Richard Warburton, we'll be covering topics such as Post-Brexit Britain, trade, cybersecurity, ASEAN, resilience and risk, COP26, defence and culture, and more. A quick bit of housekeeping before we get the session started formally. The session is meant to be engaging and inspiring. All viewers have been put on mute today, so if you would like to pose a question, please use the quick Q&A facility at the bottom of Zoom, and we'll try and address these throughout the discussion. I would also like to say a quick thank you to James Price and the Information and Communications and Technology Business Committee here within the Chamber, who have also helped to make today's event happen through various connections. So thank you to the committee for all of your support, as always. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Richard Warburton, President of the British Chamber of Commerce here in Singapore, to formally introduce our guest today and to start the proceedings. Richard, a warm welcome and over to you.
David, thank you very much for that introduction. I'm absolutely delighted to be chairing this fireside chat with Penny today. Really exciting to engage a whole range of topics, David, as you've just spoken about. So to start, really, what I'd like to do is just share Penny's biography, and if you'll indulge me, it is quite extensive, and I think it's just testament to actually everything that Penny's been involved in through her career so far. So if you allow me to read, Penny Mordaunt has been a member of Parliament since 2010. She is a former Minister of Local Government, of the Armed Forces, where she was the first woman to hold this position, of Disabled People, Health and Work, and a former Secretary of State for International Development and Secretary of State for Defence, again, the first woman to hold the post. She is also a former governor at the World Bank. Prior to entering into politics, Penny headed organisations in the public, private and voluntary sectors, as well as founding her own business. She has been an aid worker and an officer in the Royal Naval Reserve, and is now Honorary Captain of the 2nd Mine Countermeasures Squadron. In 2000, she worked in Washington for President George W. Bush and has maintained close links to US politics. Her book, Greater Britain After the Storm, published last year, which sets out who we are and what we should be doing next, became an Amazon bestseller within 24 hours of launch. All proceeds from the book are funding community organisations and charities. She is currently Paymaster General and has led the government's resilience work, overhauling how the UK prepares and responds to threats, and has bolstered the UK's defensive cybersecurity. She deputises for both Michael Gove and Lord Frost on COVID operations and the Withdrawal Agreement Joint Committee, respectively. She works with a large number of voluntary organisations, including being patron of Enableability, a charity which helps disabled children and their families, an ambassador for Forgotten Veterans UK, and is a trustee of the Wyoming Manor Trust, a social enterprise she founded based around restoring a neglected listed building at the centre of a housing estate. Penny, a very warm welcome to you this afternoon.
Thank you, and thanks for inviting me to be here, and to everyone who's joined the call. Great to be here.
Excellent, thank you. I'm absolutely delighted that we do have this opportunity to talk, and a very warm welcome again to the British Chamber of Commerce in Singapore and our members from the line today. We also have Her Excellency Cara Owen, British High Commissioner, join us as a guest on the call today. So as David said earlier, we do have a wide range of topics to discuss, and really pulling on your extensive experience of your career to date. And I think we've woven through all of this, Penny. A lot of the members are very keen to feel that connectivity back with the United Kingdom. A lot of our members haven't been able to travel for the last 18 months, so it's good. It'll be good to hear what's going on for the majority of us, which is home. So to start proceedings, what I've just I promise you a gentle start. So let me ask some questions about yourself, if I may. So you have held several positions in the UK government since being elected 11 years ago in 2010. and you currently hold the cabinet position of Her Majesty's Paymaster General, which you've held since February last year. Please could you explain a little bit more about your role about what your role is in government as Paymaster General, and what a typical day looks like, if indeed there is a typical day?
Well, you're right. There is no such thing as a typical day in my role, because it is a role that historically it'll either sit in Treasury or in Cabinet Office, but it tends to take on the issues of the day, which makes it quite an exciting post to hold. And you outlined some of the challenges I've got in my in tray. I'm the cross-government lead on defensive cyber. We have reworked our whole approach to resilience, which has come out of the integrated review and was clearly, obviously, a big focus during the COVID crisis as well. So looking at our risk register, looking at how we develop a new resilience strategy, which is a whole of society approach, which is more international as well as domestic focused. And then a whole raft of special projects, as well as the work I do for Lord Frost and Michael Gove. So that could range from 1 minute trying to help with the current situation that we have in terms of Afghanistan. The next minute it could be trying to find a way that the father of the bride can escort his daughter down the aisle. It is really that diverse. And sitting in the Cabinet Office, you get to really sort of kick the tires on what's happening in a number of departments. So it's fascinating. I'm lucky to have it.
Excellent, excellent. And in addition to that very busy day job, I believe you're also the Royal Navy reservist and an honorary captain of the 2nd Mine Countermeasures Squadron. I know your constituency is Plymouth, but what's your association with the Royal Navy?
Portsmouth. Don't confuse the two. Very similar, lots of grey ships, I'm happy to say. I think that I've managed to have most of my reservist career whilst being a member of Parliament, and it is a fascinating role. But I've just in the last few years moved over to be what they call an honorary, so I don't have to do as much training and sea time, and have a much more of a strategic role supporting the First Sea Lord. And obviously this is a critical moment for our country, and particularly the Navy. There are huge opportunities out there, but we to really capitalise on them, we need to ensure trade routes are open. We need to ensure that we have freedom of navigation, all of those things. And I'm very pleased also that we've got carrier strike back as well, which is a capability that our country, I think, has missed and should never be without. So a very exciting time, and delighted to still be doing my bit in uniform as well.
Excellent, excellent. So you mentioned carrier strike, and I think we're going to come to that later. But you also mentioned Afghanistan, and I think it is the topic of today. So really, if you're okay, let's start with Afghanistan. Yeah, and then we'll tilt towards Asia and China as well. So, the news over the last 11 days has really been dominated by the evolving and unfortunate situation in Afghanistan. I think the speed and ease which the Taliban have retaken control of the country appears to have caught many by surprise. As the UK Parliament was recalled last Wednesday to debate the matter, you issued a statement in which you spoke about the anger of the effort and sacrifice squandered, of the concerns around increased terror and terrorism, and that democracy should be about defiance and not deference. You are the former Secretary of State for Defence. I know you've been to Afghanistan personally many times. Perhaps you can elaborate on your personal view around defiance, and then the UK government's position on the withdrawal of troops and the collapse of the Kabul government.
Well, I think you don't have to have had the experiences that I have had in Afghanistan and other colleagues have had in Afghanistan to be really appalled at what is happening. And in addition to the fears that you've just listed about what will happen for the rest of the world, what will happen to those people left in Afghanistan, and those sorts of issues, I think that we feel something else too, which is that as we see what is happening to that country, we're also reflecting on what that means for our own as well, what that says about us. I don't think that the British like not being able to do something that they think needs to be done. They don't like to feel that impotence. And I think that we all know, it's been rehearsed many times on the media, why we are limited in the options that we have in front of us. But against that backdrop, against what has happened and what is done, what happens next still matters. Why this is so keen for Britain is because trust is really important for our nation, whether it's trade, whether it's being a reliable partner. That's why what we do next matters, why Ben Wallace and his colleagues are doing so much at such great risk to extract as many people as we possibly can. And I'm sure you'll hear in the coming days what Dominic Raab, what the Prime Minister are trying to get done with their G7 partners and others in terms of what happens next. What happens next still matters. And the final thing I would say, I felt this very keenly, particularly the constituency I represent, is that we were right to do what we did. We have made Afghanistan a safer place. Much has happened. I mean, you don't hear about, and we haven't heard over the last 20 years about what has happened, the progress that has been made. I've seen it over the years in towns all across Afghanistan, the change that is there. It's only when at the point where we're potentially going to lose those gains for those people that we really realise how much has been done by the security that our servicemen and women created. And I want every veteran to know that they did make the world a safer place. They did get good things done, and we should never forget that, and we should never hesitate to do a similar thing again when we think it's right.
Yeah, and you spoke, you just mentioned impotence, and Boris Johnson did say, and I quote, "The West could not continue this US-led mission, a mission conceived and executed in support and defense of America, without American logistics, without US air power, and without American might." Really, the American swift withdrawal, was that prepared for, and what is the impact on UK civilians and troops? I know even in the press today, they're talking that, we have a deadline in 7 days, which may or may not happen. What's your take on that, Penny?
So there is obviously discussion still going on with regard to the timetable and exactly what that will mean. But Ben Wallace did a huge amount, I know this, to try and maintain some sort of presence, try and build a coalition. And he ran out of options. That is very clear. But what I would also say is that this is a choice. We are presented with choices because of events, and I think everyone was very taken by surprise at the speed at which this happened. But upstream, we have choices too, and that's why I've always argued for strong defence spending. That's why I've always argued to retain capabilities and to ensure that we have what we need to be able to have that range of options in the future. And we should learn from this. And we should also strengthen those alliances, and particularly NATO, to ensure that we have more choice in the future. I never want to be in a position like this, and I never want to be in a position like this again.
Agreed, absolutely. You say much has happened in Afghanistan that we should recognise and praise. I think so. This latest the latest intervention in Afghanistan has lasted 20 years. How much of the UK's effort was around building up a democracy in Afghanistan? And you spoke about we need to establish trust and reliable partners, but how much of what's happening now will impact the UK's relationship, both in the Middle East and on the wider global stage?
So a great deal of effort was spent in terms of democracy, building a democracy, but also building up civil society too. There have been criticisms about how that was done and that it was too centralized, it wasn't regionalized enough. And I think you have to weigh those criticisms against the ease of doing particular things. But there is no doubt a huge amount of good was done. The space and security that was provided to enable civil society to thrive, as well as all of the other things, the commerce, the education, all of those things, the court system, and the security forces as well, was I think very much worth doing. And we had got ourselves to that position where it was not a great deal to hold that, to give the security forces what they needed to maintain that, the capabilities they needed to do that. So I think that was important. It was the right thing to do. It is a blow to us, but as I've said before, our history is not one of endless victories. This feels like a defeat, as my colleague Tom Tugendhat said, but it is not a victory for the Taliban. It is, they have not won. They've only won decades of, for their wives and their daughters being, cast into the Stone Age. It is not a victory in the sense that we would recognize. And what we do next matters. Our history of being a reliable partner, what we're doing now, British servicemen and women risking their lives to extract people, and I'm sure in future you will hear the full story about what has been done, but it is utterly heroic. That is what we can rely on in terms of demonstrating our trust and our dedication to the particular values that we hold dear. And I think people understand what we would rather was happening, but we are where we are, and we will do everything we can to help the situation and to ensure that what follows is as best as it can be.
And maybe on that then, so the G7 are meeting today actually, and obviously Afghanistan will be the topic of conversation. What do you think those choices could be looking forward?
Well, I'm afraid that question will be determined by the appetite of the United States. And I understand that there are domestic issues that are very pressing in the US right now. But what we do next really matters in this situation. So I know that my colleagues in government will be doing everything that they can to ensure that we are first able to do as much as we can in this immediate window to get people to safety, but also that we can give ourselves the best chance of ensuring that people are safe in Afghanistan, that we have and that we do not have a return of the kind of activity that we have seen that will directly provide a threat to our nations too.
Maybe if I can just move us then on from Afghanistan to maybe more of an Asia tilt. I know you've been to Singapore previously. You've participated in the Shangri-La dialogue here, which is obviously Asia's defence summit. I believe one specific dialogue you were involved in saw the first engagement from senior Chinese delegates. Why was that significant, and what progress have you seen in that regard as well?
Well, I think it was most likely an indication of the importance that is going to in the spotlight, I think, on the region, but also the importance of particular defence issues such as freedom of navigation, such as the kinds of things that you will no doubt see being discussed as we have our carrier group in the region, and I think that is going to become much more of a focus. It is absolutely critical that we do everything we can to support those international norms. They have great consequences if they're degraded and devalued in any way. And I also think that you're going to see much more ship presence in the region, and a greater focus from the government on all fronts, particularly on trade, and development issues. So I think it should be a really exciting time. I very much enjoyed our engagement with the Chinese delegates that were sent. And I think those dialogues are really important. It's important to get messages across. It's also important to build rapport and understanding as well.
I think a lot of that then comes back to the building the trust as well, and you can only do that through the physical meeting of these people as well. So
absolutely.
You spoke earlier about the Carrier Strike Group, and the Carrier Strike Group headed by HMS Queen Elizabeth did come through Singapore a few weeks ago. The group is supported by US and Dutch warships. Obviously, they're going up through the South China Sea. And you spoke about the freedom of navigation challenges, where there was a lot of talk about potential conflict or potential issues as the Chinese may have reacted. We haven't really seen that materialize at the moment. But you said at the start, it's great to have the Carrier Strike Group back. Can you just reinforce the importance of the visual presence and what it means to project UK's image through the Navy in this part of the world?
I think it's incredibly important. When we talk about having a presence, I think the image it conjures up in people's mind is sort of nice cocktail parties on the flight deck. And I'm not that I'm against nice cocktail parties on the flight deck, but it is so much more than that. It is a huge investment. It is a huge statement of intent, and the capabilities that come with that ship are incredibly important. It is our only secure airfield in the world. It gives you tremendous reach. It gives you tremendous options. And previously, when we've had those kinds of ships in operation, we have used them for a whole variety of issues, not just in conflict situations, but they are a massive deterrent. And a deterrent that's very visible and in use, but they're also incredibly flexible ships for doing all sorts of things, but just because of the size of them and what you can do with that kind of space that you can move around. So I think that does send a powerful message, as well as the soft power messages that come from it. And I know that it is incredibly valued, being able to have not just ships of that size, but the volume in the fleet as well to do ship visits. It is incredibly important, and I know First Sea Lord is very keen to have more of our fleet forward deployed around the world. We don't want to see grey hulls in Portsmouth or Plymouth. We want them out doing what they were designed to do, and a huge effort is being made to do that. I think it's a very exciting time for the fleet and the country.
Excellent. We very much hope to see HMS Queen Elizabeth as the strike group comes back through Singapore later on this year. So can I just turn our focus now towards the UK and the post-Brexit Britain, if I can call it that, and the link to that then is trade as well. This is clearly an important time for the UK. I think it's amazing how time flies. So I think it's 5 years ago since the referendum was held, and almost 20 months since we left the EU. I know at the time you were a supporter of the referendum as well. Currently, if we listen to what is coming out of Westminster at the moment, there's a lot of talk about the Indo-Pacific tilt, about building back better, the levelling up agenda across the UK. Can you talk to us really what's happened in the UK since we formally left the European Union? What's been done? What can we get excited about? And maybe has post-Brexit Britain materialised as you anticipated as well? So lots of questions in there. Sorry, Penny.
Well, the first thing I should say is a big thank you to the Chamber, because you have been incredibly helped throughout all of this process, not just in terms of the practical things that you do, which are great, but also good for morale as well, because I do think that we have tended, there's two sort of downsides to how the Brexit and what has followed it has been played out, usually in media coverage, and that people think that once you've left, then that is the way the world is going to look, as opposed to the starting point, the jumping off point. So a lot of work has clearly gone on. The Bionic Liz Truss has been doing all sorts of things, rolling over trade deals, pushing the boundaries, but also developing policy. And now that we have our seat back at the WTO, really setting out an ambitious agenda, which we hope others can get behind as well, to really move the trade agenda forward, really put consumers at the heart of those negotiations that she is doing, and give all nations more options, and put some welly behind the sort of free trade agenda, really. So there, I think there will be big opportunities to come. A lot of work has gone on just to get us to this point. And now we're at that point where we can really start to build and develop both the policy space, but also just what that means in practical terms for opportunities for businesses. And I think also, understandably, the media always focus on the negatives. So we obviously have a lot of things still to do, still to work out. Lord Frost is incredibly busy sorting out issues like including the Northern Ireland Protocol issues, but all sorts of things that need to follow, including enabling regulation and getting a shipshape in Whitehall for producing that enabling regulation that is at the speed that we need to for business and science. So lots to do and lots to sort out, but also there are these massive opportunities. And I think we have clearly been through a rough old time over the last couple of years, on top of the disruption and focus that needed to be put into actually getting us and extracting us from the EU. Now I think we're at the point where we can really start to maximise those opportunities, and you will see changes in terms of how we organise ourselves as the UK government about providing more practical support to business in a way that we have not done before.
And actually, you talked about setting the government, really the starting block around free trade and the like. Yeah, and if I reflect what's happened over the last few months, we've become an ASEAN dialogue partner. We've been approved to join the CPTPP, Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership. Discussions are ongoing around the digital economy agreement. Has Brexit been the catalyst for change and accelerated these trade agreements, or were they already in the planning? And secondly, why is Indo-Pacific lens so important for the UK?
Well, the region is so important to us. We have all sorts of strategic interests, clearly, but also it is going to become the centre for world trade. It is incredibly important region, and I think also it is important not just in terms of material trade, but also in the support for those international norms on which sit global prosperity. There are, as well as very practical things, there are also discussions around values and ideas and the kinds of cooperation we want between nations, and very much where the action is on all of that is on your doorstep. So this is incredibly strategically important for us. I think Brexit has been a catalyst to these things. I think getting our seat back around particular tables has been very important, and you list some of those new opportunities. Having that voice there to champion the things that are important to us as a nation, I think is incredibly important. And I also think it's really made us evaluate where our footprint is in the world, what resource that we are levering against that, and are we really maximizing all we can from the multilateral and the bilateral relationships that we have. To do that really well, we have to get ourselves organized in Whitehall a bit differently, and Lord Frost and other departments, including trade, have been really thinking about how we engage with business and trying to do it in a much more business-like way, to be frank. And that, I think, is a good thing. People are going to need bespoke advice. They're going to need a different kind of support in the future, because the issues that they're grappling with are going to be more complex. And if we want them to really maximize the opportunities that are there, we need to be providing those services in a different way.
Yeah, and I know from a chamber perspective, we have, our David and the chamber team have been working tirelessly to support new market entrants into Singapore and ASEAN. So we have been that landing point for UK SMEs coming through, and that's one of the key values of the chamber is to enable us to plug UK companies into ASEAN. Last year we supported, I think, about $47 million of UK exports. So what is the specific strategy for growing UK exports? You talk about reorganisation of government, you talked about being more business-like in the way that we engage, and the dynamic Liz Truss has been around the world. What else is there around growing UK exports that we can look at?
Well, I think it's that you will have seen over the last few years, and indeed started by a lot of the work that Liam Fox did. It's providing some infrastructure that can really help spot opportunities, but also partner people up and give businesses more sales opportunities fundamentally. So that has been put in place. Where I think we want to develop this is to provide almost, I could describe it as a kind of customer care department for business. I've long been a critic of how government has historically very badly engaged with business. I think when I was, you kindly mentioned my CV earlier, but when I was at DWP, I just looked at the volume of initiatives we had on one issue across government to the same poor HR director, and across government it was about 40, no coordination between any of them. And I think the sorts of issues business are really needing advice on now, particularly now we have left the EU, are some very technical issues. They need subject matter experts and expertise specific to particular sectors, but they also need some sort of more upstream advice about very large decisions they might be taking for their company, about where they might have a presence, the kind of structures that they might put in place. And those are the sorts of things that we've not done terrifically well in the past, or people have been confused as to really who to engage with. We've got a lot of engagement forums and platforms across government, but how are we really plugging in? And also, how are we really making use of all the things that you do as a chamber? Are we really tailoring what we do to really meet your needs and to maximise all the work that you are doing? Because especially given the situation we've just had, and you rightly point out how isolating it has been for businesses, which really thrive on that that connection. And I fully appreciate people being very cut off. You have been one of the bodies that has lessened that for people. So you'll, I think, in short order, see some new initiatives in government, spearheaded particularly by the Cabinet Office under Lord Frost and Trade with Liz Truss, but also other departments like DEFRA, in enabling their expertise and their deep expertise on particular technical areas to be much more available and accessible to businesses that really need that new advice.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a couple of key elements. Yeah, that technical advice and opinion, I think, is key, but also the simplification of the government bureaucracy as well, if I can call it that. So
you can. It's got to get better.
One of the ways of improving the efficiency of working is obviously around the embracing of digital, and I referenced the digital economy agreement as one of the initiatives that is ongoing at the moment. Digital trade is certainly growing in prominence. So what does that look like from a UK perspective? I mean, this is all around frictionless trade, support for both large corporates and small business.
Absolutely, and to really get there and to really do this well, I mean, despite the backdrop of the practical things that we needed to get done to leave the EU, we've also had our eyes on the horizon as well in terms of what does the best border in the world look like, and also what policies are we developing through our seat on the World Trade Organization. The challenge for government is, I mean, the answers to all of this lie with businesses themselves. I think we're not in the ideal go-to people in terms of designing what people need to provide that tracking of whether it's ingredients or products. Businesses do this very well. They are best placed to decide what is going to work for them. Where we have to get our act together in government is around the sometimes creaky legacy systems that we have had and how we interface with the systems that business puts in place without things falling over. And so a huge amount of effort has gone into really enabling that interface to be created in a way that is going to stand up to the rigors that are going to be there in the future. But that's what we need to do. We need to enable business to drive this and to put the systems in place that they need and connect with both our systems, but also wanting that to happen in other nations as well. And we've got a great track record of that, certainly from my DFID days of supporting the kind of infrastructure elsewhere in the world that will enable those sorts of things to happen, and also cut down on bureaucracy and cut down on time that it takes to get goods from one place to another. So big opportunities there. Britain is well placed to do this, and we think this is potentially a big growth area.
Absolutely. Penny, can I just move the focus slightly to so you were a governor at the World Bank. Again, another impressive role on the CV, and it's linked to digital trade, and it's around currency. So China have just recently launched a digital currency by their central bank, and they've said it's designed to be untethered to the global financial system. What's your perspective on that? Maybe wearing your government hat and your ex-World Bank hat.
So I think it's clearly understood why China is doing this. As well as its ambitions in terms of growth in particular sector, that there are big paybacks potentially for them in other areas, the ability to get information, for example, and also it potentially, I mean, we have yet to see quite how this is going to operate, what they might be doing with other nations. Clearly, we would not want people to be bypassing or enabling others to bypass sanction regimes and all those sorts of things. So there are some clear issues that should be concerning with this. But I have always taken the approach, and indeed during my tenure at the World Bank, moved China from being on our development funds, from being a donor, a recipient nation to a donor nation, and encouraging China to put their investments into vehicles which we could, with our expertise, help them shape, particularly on the development side of things. So trying to encourage activity away from some of the practices that we have seen China do in its infrastructure investments to things which we will argue are in its long-term interest to do. Clearly, there are concerns about a digital currency which is not plugged into the global financial system in the way that more traditional currencies are. But what we need to do is to have a strategy about how we can encourage and incentivize those new opportunities and the things that China wants to enable to happen in a way that alleviates the concerns about how this could be used not to support international norms and not to support the values and the international standards and all the other things that we want to see.
I'm just move the focus back to the UK and a term that gets used increasingly more so is around the levelling up agenda, and so what does that really mean in non-government speak, and actually why is that important for local government leadership and the communities that they support as well?
Well, I think levelling up plus global Britain, quite often people are scratching their heads and they're nice buzzwords, and we kind of really know what they mean, but you know, writing it all down is obviously is trickier, and quite often they are presented as in conflict with one another. So can you know, if you've got a limited pot, are you going to enable JWIC to get back on its feet, or are you going to be wanting to do more on girls' education around the world? I actually see them as not in conflict with each other, but actually a necessary condition for each other. And if we are wanting in the UK to build centres of excellence to really enable particular cities or regions, other locations to have a clear, the kind of identity and unique selling point which really helps turn communities around. You know, I've always branded my own city as the maritime heart of the UK. We can see the focus on particular centres of excellence around the UK. And we know that the trend is much more towards having cities and regions partnered and paired and linked to other centres of excellence around the world. That's how you really get inward investment into the UK and how you really create higher value jobs and all the other good things that we want to see. We cannot, although there'll be lots of chat in the next few months about the Levelling Up Fund and what local authorities are bidding for, that is only part of this agenda. Unless we align all the sectors, unless we are really unleashing the full potential of the private sector, we aren't going to achieve this. The Treasury has deep pockets, but that's not going to get you as far as we need. And so what you're doing and really making those connections around the world to establish those links, whether they be academic links and research, or whether it be partnership opportunities or investment both ways, that's what we need to be focused on. And I think that the thing that will really help people understand the levelling up agenda is when you start to see it. I always think, show not tell.
Yeah, and the challenge with show not tell is that quite often things just get lost in the fog of everydayism. And I promised myself I wouldn't mention the C word, COVID, until right at the end, but I'll bring it here. To what degree has COVID been, for all the right reasons, it's been the focus, but to what extent has it taken the eye off the ball on other agendas which are running pan-government at the moment?
So I think that it's been very absorbing, and it's been very, I mean, never mind government, for individuals, it has been consuming. The limits that it has put on business activity, other activity, I mean, just everyday life. It has put a lot of things on hold, and clearly had a massive negative impact on education, which is needs to be a priority in terms of trying to catch up as we come out of this situation. But I would be a little bit more optimistic and turn your question back on itself, because I think despite all the trauma and horrors that we've been through, there are some lessons and there are some opportunities that have come from the shared experience that we have all had. The key lesson for me is that we can modernize, we can do things differently, and we can do them pretty darn quick if we set our minds to it. We also know that if we ask people to help, if we clearly identify the mission, the challenge, the need, people step up and business steps up as well. There were moments during the last 2 years, whether it was, how business responded to things like the ventilator challenge, how it was that communities, people in our streets responded to the fact that the little old lady at the end of the street, who they hadn't spoken to for 20 years, needed her prescription taken to her every week. These sorts of things. We have stronger communities now. We have people who have stepped forward and said, I want to help, I want to volunteer, I want my community to be more resilient. And in some pretty important public services, we've seen them look at challenges that have been sat in their in tray for a long time, about how you can deliver healthcare differently, for example. And everyone has moved. Everyone has brought in new services. You were able to still get hold of a GP and have a consultation, and you didn't have to go into the surgery to do it. So much more stuff was done online. If we can do that, we've demonstrated we can do that when we are really up against it. Why don't we continue to move at that pace to bring in the reforms and the change that we need, how we deliver services, how we personalize those services, and all of the opportunities that come from that. So that's what I'm really interested in, particularly having the resilience brief. How do we not lose that? Because that is a really exciting thing, to have reminded ourselves what we are actually capable of doing.
And actually, it's to use a phrase, it's never waste a good crisis. I think it's again, it's been that catalyst for change, which is a positive. Just maybe two final questions on trade, if I may. Just in terms of UK unicorns, I mean, just looking at them, the UK is really a hotbed of startups at the moment. Why is it such a good environment for businesses to set themselves up?
I think there are a number of factors behind this. I think that clearly there has been work and policies and financial incentives and tax breaks and all sorts of things to really encourage startups and for people to invest in the UK, but also grow really innovative business here too. And I think that we are also recognizing that we have to reform government to enable these kind of organizations, the game-changing organizations, the disruptors, to maximize the opportunities they have to help us solve problems and do things better. So outside of government initiatives, work, for example, that Public has done, work going on in government departments in areas, I mean, defense is a good example of this, really recognizing the innovation that they haven't really been maximizing. People are changing and are wanting greater engagement from these sorts of businesses. But I think perhaps more importantly than any of those very practical things, it's a kind of attitude. It's an attitude that the UK has about trying, about taking a risk, a kind of can-do approach, not a why but a why not mentality. And I'd like to see more of that. I think we always undervalue what business does. We never see in annual reports how much taxes people have paid and how many nurses that has funded, and the social good that business does and what it enables governments to do. I'd like us to be much more celebratory of those sorts of things, and to I think now is the moment, particularly over the last 2 years, where we really want to raise people's energy levels and encourage people to help us grow the economy and to create some opportunities we really do need.
I'm just going to just stop there. There's a question that's coming on the chat which is linked to the China question, Penny, and if I may, just the question was, with Penny's World Bank hat on, can she see the eventual full integration of the Chinese banking system into the world banking system? And what changes would need to happen to enable that? So,
look, everything is possible. And I think that what we need to do, and particularly in our relationship to China, is have a very clear long-term plan about where we want, what we would like China to do. And we need to be doing things through the multilateral relationships that we have that incentivize that, and also remind China why it is in its interest to do that. At DFID, ironically, I was always very keen to talk about humanitarian and global health security issues with China, because given its ambitions, given the Belt and Road Initiative and all those things, it was very clear it should be in its interest to be concerned about those things and to be making investments to alleviate problems in those areas. And we have to find the win-wins, and we have to really understand what China's priorities and concerns are. Very practical concerns as well as ambitions that it has. China is a great nation. My view is it doesn't have to do some of the things that it's been doing to demonstrate that. So I think my answer to the question is all things are possible.
And just to finish on trade, Penny, you very kindly referenced the work that the British Chambers do to support UK PLC. Just what more could we do? What more could our members do to support the UK's efforts?
So, well, I would say keep morale up. I think that so whether it's trade, whether it's the Global Britain agenda, whether it's levelling up, fundamentally this is all about the same thing. It's about people connecting with other people to get some good things done. And as well as the sort of services and support, the networks that you enable are really critical. And I think that we want people to be encouraged, and so your work in that area is vitally important. I would also say that your views are very important. I just seen another question come up just about the US dollar. We were talking about banking systems and technical issues. There are other things that affect issues like that. What has happened in Afghanistan, the erosion of trust in the West, affects things like that. So you must feel, I think, empowered to talk about the issues that are a concern to you, which frame all of those more technical issues that concern you day to day. And I think this is really important. Why Britain's brand as most trusted nation is so critical. All the things that we've been talking about, from those international norms to the US dollar as the reserve currency, rely on trust. And that is incredibly important to most nations, but ours in particular, because we are not a superpower. We are a challenger nation, and our unique factor is trust.
So moving from trade, if I can, to leadership then. You've been in government 11 years. As I said in your introduction, you've led several departments, including a few where you were the first female to do so. Some commentators have suggested that if you'd run in the 2019 leadership contest, you could well have been the next British Prime Minister. So drawing on your experiences from the Royal Navy, the government, and from the charities you've been actively involved in, what do you consider are the key traits of good leadership?
So I think that we have a real crisis actually in leadership. I'm not talking about my own government, but I think more generally across the board, we have seen a huge number of chief execs struck off from FTSE 250 companies due to ethical lapse. We have seen across every sector people not being able to have seen the juggernaut coming down the track at us. And this is against a backdrop where leaders are inundated with information and data and should have been able to see those things. And I think that there are a number of reasons why that hasn't happened. Part of it is about how difficult it is for leaders these days, particularly because the world is moving at such a pace and they have information overload, to join the dots between particular data and information, to really understand the consequences of something on something else. And I also think that part of that is also about the diversity that we have on boards and in other meeting rooms. The more diverse the organization, the greater the diversity of thought and experience, the better decisions those organizations make. And really enlightened organizations understand that very well and are, if you've got greater gender diversity, for example, you're 15% more profitable. So that is really important. But I also think that it is not just what you do, it's also who you are as well. And increasingly, values, we come back to the issue of trust again, is going to become much more important. I mean, just very practically, the volume of global goods was surpassed by the value of data and information a couple of years ago. Trust is key to the future. Successful nations in the future are going to be the most trusted nations on earth. And to do that, we need better leadership across all sectors. I have written extensively on the decay of that trust across many sectors, and I think it is it's what we should be discussing in business schools.
Yeah, and building on that then, Penny, there does seem to be a shift in dynamic around leadership more towards societal leadership. So yeah, a more holistic focus, the greater look at the we rather than the I, embracing those softer social skills such as emotion and empathy as a leader. Are you seeing that change in government, or is that predominantly business led at the moment?
Well, I think it's got to be both. I mean, I quite often I will go into primary schools and people will ask me what I do, and I usually answer by telling them what I am, because yes, I do some practical things, my team do practical things, casework, we've been very heavily involved with cases, for example, in trying to extract people from Afghanistan. There's all sorts of things that we do. But most importantly, the most important aspect of my job is the effect and support I can provide to other people, the businesses, organizations in my community, giving them the confidence to be able to go and do those things. Nothing I do can really do that. What I am can. And I think that when you look at leaders who have huge impact, whether it's on the global stage or whether it's in the local community, they are people that inspire others. And I think sometimes we forget how important that is in terms of leadership. There are lots of leaders that it doesn't come to naturally, but they understand the importance of it and they work at it and they understand how to do it. That is critical in politics, as you'd expect, but it is also critical in business and in other walks of life too.
Yeah, and one of the key, just follow on the theme around leadership, we do have COP26 in 70 days from today. The UK is leading the climate change conference. I mean, climate change is something that resonates across a lot of our membership. The Chamber is carbon neutral, and we do have a whole campaign around the sustainability agenda. Britain's leadership around climate change, we lead the world in renewable energy through offshore wind. We've reduced carbon emissions more than any G20 country in the last 3 years. Both of those facts taken kindly from your book, so thank you for that. And the last week, the UK government issued their first green transition bond, or green transition loan to a UK business to support development of low carbon energy transition and sustainable infrastructure. We did have the latest IPCC report on climate change, which presents a code red for humanity. The UK is already doing a lot, but how is their report and obviously COP26 coming up going to influence UK policy in other areas, for example, cybersecurity, defence, international development, in the context of more, or is it a more urgent need in terms of moving to renewable energy and smart grids, for example?
So I think this is again an incredibly important moment, and the pressure is on ALOC to galvanize support and keep ambition high as we go into that conference and that meeting. We, I think, have done a huge amount over the last few years. There is still a lot more to do, and there's some really exciting stuff coming online as well, as you'd expect as a nautical person. I'm very keen on tidal power, and there's some fantastic new technology which is making that much more possible. So in terms of cost, so we're well placed to be keeping ambition high and to being that kind of catalyst, both in practical terms, but also in inspiring others to adopt some of these things. I think the other area that we have done really well, and you mentioned development, but we are well placed because of our expertise in that field, and because where we choose to invest in through our multilateral partners to really enable nations who are just developing these opportunities and technologies to leapfrog and to really come in at a level which would took us a long time to get to. So very much like the investments we made on mobile banking and enabling organizations in Africa, for example, to grow that technology and suddenly open up all sorts of opportunities for communities to trade in a way that they hadn't done before. Can we do the same with energy supply, with renewables, with that kind of issue? So I think again, it's finding those opportunities. It's finding innovative ways of enabling this to happen in a very practical way. There's lots of discussion, obviously, around the costs of doing these things. If we are piling costs on consumers and if we're piling costs on businesses, these things won't happen, because those are the only things that are going to get us where we need to be. So this is a huge not burden, but challenge, really, that we have ahead of us. And I know that the COP team have been doing a huge amount to ensure that it is going to be successful, and that this is the moment that we really enable us to chart the course that is going to hopefully enable future generations to live in better security than they might otherwise do.
Yeah, and I was really going to then just ask you, what are your specific hopes around the outcomes of COP26 in terms of government level commitments?
Well, we are ambitious in this area. Clearly, I mean, people say that our own contribution, substantial though it has been in terms of our nation, is a fraction of the challenge that is there globally. And I think it is trying to get some of those major players to really understand that it is, again, in their interests to be doing the right thing, but also that we're very clear. And there is not just I mean, when you go into sort of international conferences, you tend to get it down to the wire, and people are looking at what the fellas next door are up to, and whether it's a pledging conference or try to outbid each other and make sure that that they're getting some good PR out of it. I think this is one of those conferences where that is going to have to be much more fundamental, and we have to establish these agreed ways and ambitions, and it can't just be individual nations making those pledges. It has to be something much more meaningful. Otherwise it will unravel. That's why this is such a big event, and we are going to do everything we can to make a success of that.
I very much hope so. You mentioned the importance of diversity when you were talking about leadership, and from a chamber perspective, we have recently launched our diversity and inclusion hub, which is reflecting, again, one of our 5 core pillars for the business. You were the Minister for Women and Equalities, where you focused on all forms of discrimination, in particular gender equality. In your book, in relation to equality, you say, and you've alluded to this in your comments earlier around the importance of the community, but you said we must know the values that we have in common. For Britain to seize opportunities ahead, it must recognise that we need to work together. So a very clear statement there. So what's your perspective on how diverse, inclusive and equal the UK government currently is? And what else needs to be done in that regard? So
I think, I mean, when people say government, they mean both ministers and civil service. And I know that on the civil service side, there's a huge amount that has been done to ensure that we have women in high-profile roles. We've had a lot of firsts. Our ambassador in France, for example, there's some great work being done there, and I think that is because it is the importance of that is recognised. In government, the Prime Minister, although he hasn't had much credit for it, has done a lot of work when he came in to identify and mentor women, his women MPs. So unlike the fellas, he had someone in his team speak to the newly, on an individual basis, the newly elected women, really understanding what they wanted to do, what they wanted to achieve, looking at what further support could be provided. So I think that he's made great efforts to grow that pipeline and provide those opportunities, and through just on the party side, under Amanda Milling, our chairman, he has ensured that we've had a training program like we've never had before as a party. So I think these things they aren't done overnight, but he has made that a priority, and on the global stage, even with a reduced aid budget, he's made investment in education for women and girls one of his top priorities. So I think that he understands that. I think there is something else too, though, from the quote you gave in your question, which is, I think, plaguing a lot of nations, Britain, America, and others, around divided societies. There's been a lot of narrative about how divided we all are. I have argued, as you will know, that we aren't divided, even with fisticuffs over Brexit or other things. We disagree on the issue, but we agree on the process. And there's obviously a lot of media coverage around things like culture wars and things like that. I think occasionally we need to remind ourselves what it is we have in common. And why that is so important is not just to stop those fisticuffs and cheer everyone up, but it is actually a necessary condition of us being successful. We have to get people pulling in the same direction. We have to have, we tend not as a nation to have things like national missions. We're all very individualistic bunch, but I think because of the challenges we have in the world, we do need that kind of focus. And we've seen again over the last couple of years, when we've set out what those national missions are, people have risen to the challenge. And we need to do that in terms of what our ambitions are for growth, or on our ambitions around those international norms, also our ambitions about what we want our communities to look like. And the more we do that, the more united we will feel as a nation.
You mentioned a number of firsts within government, and you personally have had a number of firsts in terms of ministerial roles and the like. And you were the first MP to use sign language in the Commons as well. Without embarrassing yourself, do you consider yourself to be a role model for others?
It's not how I think of myself. I do think that, as I said before, those of us who are in leadership positions as community leaders, or in politics or in business, to be good leaders, we need to understand the importance of the effect we can have on other people. That is critical. Don't underestimate the importance of how you make people feel, the confidence that you might give them, as well as the practical support. But I think it is about giving that encouragement to other people. I tend to think about the people I meet, not as me as their role model, but them as mine. That is, I think that's where I get my energy and inspiration from, and why I always think that government is not really the answer. I always kind of used to refer to myself as the Cilla Black of getting things done. I connect people together. I convene people together. I try and articulate what it is we're trying to get done. And I think that's how you actually do get things done. It's about building that team. And in government, we need to be building that team UK.
We briefly touched on COVID earlier, and I know you indicated it has been all-consuming for all of us, and it's put limitation on activities. Just if I compare where Singapore is at the moment and the UK in terms of vaccination rates, I think Singapore is 78% and the UK 77%, so very similar. But actually, in terms of approach, they're quite different in terms of government approach to what is happening. I mean, there is no playbook for decisions which are being made at the moment, and we'll only find out with the benefit of hindsight in a few years' time, or maybe longer, what were the more effective policies. But really, if we look at the UK, and maybe sometimes those of us based in Singapore do look with rather green eyes at people going to festivals and out in the UK. What has enabled or been the catalyst for really the UK to open up internally within the borders?
So I think you're right, and I think it is not a one size fits all. Different locations have to make their own choices, and what will work in one place may not work in another. And although we are in similar places in terms of vaccination rates, there are all sorts of other factors that come into play about decisions to open up. I think clearly the success of the vaccination program has been, I think, the key factor in that. And I think also we invested a huge amount in behavioral science as well, and fusing that with all the other data that we had was not easy to do in terms of trying to help ministers make decisions, but it was really important because part of the recovery is also about people's confidence. And I don't just mean people paying to go to festivals, I also mean people who have been shielding and stuck at home, and we want them to have the confidence to get out and about, because ultimately that is going to help their health in future years. So on many, many different levels. So I think that, whatever people are doing around the world, it is really about understanding how that nation is feeling, and also then supporting them as part of the recovery. I think it have been tremendously difficult for people who have not been able to return back to the UK, but also have had all sorts of things that they've wanted to crack on with in their lives, both personal and in business, put on hold. And I think in those situations, we have to focus on the positive. What is it that we can do? How can we adapt our lives to meet those needs? And the other key thing that we are very focused on as a UK government is also about creating the environment elsewhere in the world, not just places like Singapore that have an advanced vaccine program, but elsewhere as well, to ensure that we all get back to where we want to be eventually. Because until we all do, we're always going to have this as a spectre hanging over us. The good news is the suite of vaccines we have, the international cooperation that we have, means that we are going to be in an improving situation, and we need to get ready for when you are fully unlocked, and just really focus on those opportunities. But back in the UK, we are very alive to that fact, and we'll be doing everything we can to support you as an organisation, but also to ensure those opportunities are there bilaterally as well.
That's good to hear, Penny. I'm conscious we've only got a few minutes left, so I just want to, before I close, maybe just talk about British culture, something that we should be very proud of and we should own. So COVID has obviously disrupted a huge element of the UK's core cultural exports, such as the Premier League, which is now back up and running. I know the English Premier League is the highest grossing football league in the world, and it's got a potential broadcast audience of 5 billion every week. So it really puts Britain on the world stage on a weekly basis. What other elements of British culture do you think are exportable?
Oh gosh, there's so many. As you know, I quite often talk about this and the things that we're known for and what it says about us as a nation. I mean, I do think that as well as the sort of the culture, the arts, business, ease of doing business, that kind of attitude. Sporting achievements is a huge part of that, and obviously today, quite by coincidence, we are starting started the Paralympics.
Yeah.
The cradle for that movement was Britain, and it was a movement born out of adversity, but also hope and inspiration. And I think for the Paralympic movement, the 2012 games were absolutely outstanding, and that was the point, I think, particularly with a lot of the work that Channel 4 did and getting the Paralympics seen in an entirely different light. And although we had this also before the Olympics, there's lots of, will it be the same? Will there be the crowds? Will school children be able to go? Will we all get behind the team? Yeah, of course we do, because of what we see those people do, the achievements and the drama and the kind of human endeavor that sits behind it. And I think that if you look at whether it's our fashion, our technology, all the things that we're known for, motorsport, all of those things, that's the kind of theme. It's about our ability to push the boundaries. It's about our ability, our belief in ourselves. And I think if there's one thing that I'd like us to break with tradition on, it's to blow our own trumpet a bit more. I recently did a lot of research around the world when I was out of government about what the world's movers and shakers thought about Britain, who we are, what we should be doing. And one of the themes is everyone thinks we're much better than we think of ourselves. And I think at this juncture and this inflection point for us, we just need to take a moment to remind ourselves that we are still a great nation. And people always laugh at politicians when they say that, but look at how many people volunteer every month, 13 million. As I speak to you, it's our warships that are escorting other people's freight, other nations' freight through the Straits of Hormuz. It's our guys on the ground who are extracting people from Afghanistan. It's our nation that wrapped its arms around 3 young Black players who missed a penalty a few weeks ago. We have incredible values that we live every day, and that's evident in everything that we export. And the world needs us to have a bit of confidence in ourselves at this moment, for trade, for the values that enable it. And so that would be my kind of closing message to you, really. It's that we export lots of things, fashion, food, but we also export those values as well, and we're right to.
And you absolutely, and you mentioned the Olympics, and I think we finished 4th in the table. Certainly from Singapore, it felt like the British people really got behind Team GB, and yeah, we all love a good unexpected win with a heart-wrenching backstory to go with it as well. You talk about the need to keep morale up, but just in summary, the effect of the Olympics and other key events on both community and culture within the UK.
I think they are powerful events because, again, they remind us what it is we all have in common. And we tend not to focus on that. The people getting along and helping each other out, as opposed to beating each other up over particular issues. The media always goes for the latter because it's much more entertaining. I think that's what those events do. They remind us, just as we had with the Euros. It's those. Quite often, sport is a catalyst to that, but it's other things too. And we need to remember, particularly over the last couple of years, the things that brought us together as a country, and what that will enable us to achieve in the future. I think that we also need to remind ourselves, the 4 nations of the UK, but also the fact that we have that global footprint, we have that international presence through our dependencies and through our relationships and history with other nations, and that should give us confidence, I think, about what happens next.
Two final questions, Penny, as we look to wrap up. Just reflecting on the last 12 months, what do you think has been your most important positive learning or change to come out of the last year? And that could be from your personal or from a government perspective.
So I think, given COVID and given Brexit, and what preceded Brexit, I think one of the key learnings is that if change isn't a process, then it becomes an event. And that's, I think if the EU had been more receptive to some of the things that David Cameron was trying to get done, we may not have even had a referendum. And although I obviously was a Brexiteer, and as I've said, we know that we can modernise, we can make progress in areas much quicker than perhaps some of our public sector and elsewhere might have thought we could, and certainly politicians thought that they could. So I think that this is the start of a more demanding public. We see, the dissatisfaction we have in places around the world with democracy and also with capitalism. And if we want to ensure those systems remain strong, I always describe them as Tinkerbell's light. If you stop believing in them, they cease to work. Then we really do have to pull our socks up. We need to modernise the building I'm sat in. I'm in Parliament today. We need to modernise Whitehall, and you're starting to see some of those reforms come through. We also need to modernise our markets. I've spoken about ethical lapse, but 50% of all the VC investments that may never generate any wealth at all. And we also really need to have some deep thinking about the mutuality that binds us, which has run through some of the questions you've asked me today. What does it mean to be a citizen of the United Kingdom? And really understanding how we can support that sense. So that would be my two takeaways from the last few years: that we need to modernise, that we need to get things to work better, and that when we put our minds to that, we can do it.
Yeah. And final question, and you've alluded to this as we've gone through, but in your book there is a whole chapter on what it means to be British. From the plucky underdog to our love of complicated rules and process. How would you summarise then, in closing, what it means to be British?
So on a light-hearted note, we do look at all sorts of traits that we have through the prism of our culture. Daleks feature heavily in chapter 1, but one of the things that's often said about us as a nation is that we're very nostalgic. Indeed, Brexit was seen as people wanting to turn the clock back to a different era, and we do love old. We love vintage things. We love our history, but what are we really nostalgic about? We're not nostalgic about scurvy or outside lavatories. We're nostalgic about a time when it was easier for us to see what our role was, both in the world, but also in our communities as well. There was a certainty that came with that, and that certainty isn't there anymore because the world is a much more complicated place. But that's what I think makes us tick as Brits. We want to understand what that is, because we feel a connection to the values that we've spoken about today, and we want to know how we can help. We're people that step up and take responsibility and ask, how can we help? Knowing that is sometimes quite difficult in the world that we are in today. But I think that's what makes us tick as Brits, and that's why our brand as most trusted nation is so important, and why the decisions that our Prime Minister is going to make over the next few days are so critical. But I have every confidence he's going to make the right decisions. And I'm still very optimistic about the future that we've got. We've got some big opportunities ahead, and we just need that clarity of vision and that determination that we're so famous for. Stubbornness, call it. Yeah. Some people might call it. And I've no doubt we will have some very successful days ahead. So despite all you've been through, and thank you for all you've been through and all you've done, I think we're going to have some good things to look forward to.
Fantastic, Penny. I'm going to pass to David very shortly to close, but I just want to say fantastic conversation. Thank you very much for the candor and the dialogue and the discussion. It was really enjoyable. So thank you. And David, do you want to formally close?
Thanks so much, Richard. That's great. Thank you so much, Penny. Wow, what a session. Thank you so much for spending the time with our community. We really appreciate it. And of course, to all of you who joined in the audience, what an incredible session. Wow, so much covered, such excellent takeaways, particularly around the amazing values that enable that global Britain, and the opportunity and the positivity, I think, has just come through so strongly. So thank you so much for all of your sharings today. And you will, of course, all of you on the call will receive a feedback form. We just appreciate if you could complete that for us. But it would, just before we went, before we said goodbye, remiss of me not to let you know of some of the fantastic things coming up with the Chamber. So I just want to highlight a couple of little bits. One is around the Singapore Green Plan 2030. We've got a dialogue with MPs from Singapore Parliament. It's an in-person event on the 22nd of September, looking to build on how British business can support the sustainability agenda here in Singapore, which is great. We've also got a session on the future of data centres on the 28th of September. And of course, our annual business awards are coming through. So you'll start to see some of the finalists from this year. So please do join us at the beginning of October, where we can look forward to celebrating the very best of business success here in Singapore. So that leaves me to say a final thank you. Once again, Penny, thank you so much for joining us today. From myself and the Chamber team, we look forward to welcoming you at an event soon, and have a great rest of the day. Take care.